Hi guys, how are you doing today? Ready for new stories I have for you? Let's go to the first one about OP, who is planning on having fourth kid despite her 3 kids are in foster care. Enjoy the stories, guys, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And of course, don't forget to leave a comment. A long time ago, I had children with my ex, and he left me after our 3rd child was born. Now, if I could go back and actually use condoms, I would, because the pull method clearly doesn't work. Anyway, I was a single mother, and my mental health was declining while I was getting stressed having 3 kids. I wanted to blow off steam some nights, so I would leave my 4, 3, and 2-year-old alone some nights just to party. Now, was this wrong? Yes. Am I the a-hole for that? Yes. Long story short, eventually complaints were made, and CPS got involved, and investigation concludes I was extremely neglectful, and I had my children taken away. Now, after they were removed, I could have fought for my children, but being single and child-free was wonderful, especially since I was 25 at the time. So I just didn't fight for my children, and eventually lost my rights as a mother. 3 years after, I fell in love with a better man, and we've been together since. We have been thinking of having a child, and started having conversations about it. Crap hit the fan when my mother found out. She was over at my house, in my area we in stage 3, one day, and my husband just made a comment on how he can't wait for our children to start running around the house. This is when my mother got angry and demanded to tell her if I was pregnant or not. I was honest with her about my partner and I thinking about having a child. She lost her crap and started spazzing at me about how I am the last person on the planet who should have another child, especially since I didn't fight for my older children. I screamed back at her that I would have gotten abortions, but her and my father's guilt-tripped me into having children when I wasn't ready because it's ungodly to have an abortion and sinful to murder children. It turns into an argument and my mother storms out in my house. Now, my husband knew about the children and how I lost my rights as a mother. I start crying, but he shrugs his shoulders and said, "Your mother has a point though." We got in an argument and apparently to my mother and husband, I was an a-hole for what I did to my children. My husband and I made up yesterday. However, my mother is still mad at me. She apologizes for the things she said, but she stands by her comment of how I shouldn't have another child, and I need to acknowledge I was a bad mother. I got mad and said her bad parenting caused me to be a bad parent, and it's been years now, and I've grown and changed and realized my mistakes with my older children. We're currently not talking right now, and no one else in the family knows about the argument that took place. Am I the a-hole for even thinking about having another child when I lost my other 3 children to the foster care system? The fact that OP actually had all 3 of them taken away speaks volumes. I cannot believe OP is using the "I was young" excuse at 25. 25 is absolutely old enough to know to not do that to your children. OP was an adult then, and she is an adult now. If OP ends up having more children and she and her boyfriend split up, it'll be the same thing all over again. OP needs to make peace with the fact that she is likely not fit to be a parent. But I'm sure that she is going to do it anyway. Background info. I'm 19 female. I have a sister, 22, and brothers, 20 and 18. 2003. My grandpa died. Dad buys a family plot. He tells mom it's for grandpa, grandma, and maybe themselves. November 2015. Dad gets sick and dies within a few weeks. Mom buries Dad in the plot with Grandpa. Shortly after, we noticed we're being followed. My sister sees this dude in his car with a camera while walking out of the grocery store. We tell Mom, and she doesn't know what to make of it, but tells us not to go out alone. Weeks later, Mom gets a call from one of Dad's sisters, who accuses Mom of murdering Dad. Mom is actually concerned by the allegations. She provides the death certificate and medical records. My siblings and me have no contact with them from this point on. 2019. I get a call from my sister, who tells me to look at my texts. She had sent me pictures of a private Facebook group. From 2015 onward, there are photos of us around town, Mom's new husband, our house, cars, Zillow photos of our house that we sold, as well as Dad's death certificate and medical records Mom had provided years ago, room and board and tuition costs of my brother and sister's schools, speculative cost breakdowns of Mom's wedding and honeymoon, the price and tax history of our new house. Essentially, it was like all this stuff showing how Mom spent money. They were accusing her of murdering Dad for his life insurance money. Their theory was that Dad was poisoned by my stepdad. This page was an accumulation of evidence to prove they did. I then find out that they had spent the whole time harassing Mom about the insurance money. They believe Dad's will stated they were entitled to 1/3 of Dad's money and assets. Present time, Grandma dies. Mom calls and asks me what I thought about allowing Grandma to be buried with Dad and paying for the funeral. I said no. Mom says okay. Later, on group call, Sister and Mom think we should cover the cost and allow her to be buried. She explains how she got a call about how they couldn't afford to pay for the funeral, and it was Dad's wishes to have her be buried there. The rest of us disagree and don't care about their lack of money or Dad's wishes. Outnumbered, Mom said okay, but clearly disagreed with the decision. Since then, we have been harassed by their calls. I haven't taken any, but my brother accidentally answered. My aunt began speaking like she was reading a script, saying how our mother would be honored if she could be buried next to our father and our brother. I got pissed and was like, how about you throw your mother into the ducking trash and leave our family alone? Mom says that I was rude and should have handled myself better. Am I the a-hole for doing that and for not caring about their inability to afford a funeral, Dad's wishes? I guess my grandma is in the fridge, still waiting her final resting place. Edit. My grandma was not the creator of the group, but a member. She had made comments at my dad's funeral that she found it interesting that my dad died so quickly. My dad had been supporting my grandma before his death. My mom stopped sending money afterwards. I think she had some involvement with encouraging her kids to come after my mom. Besides the PI pics, all the information found on the private group was info already on the internet. My mom allowed us to decide what happens to the plot. Considering that she remarried, she did not feel like it was her place to determine what happened to the plot, as she would not be buried there anymore. My mom has a soft spot for everyone, but is also a pushover. In my opinion, she's being guilt-tripped into doing it. Mild, yes, an a-hole, but only for making things harder for Mom. She's the main recipient of the harassment. It would be better if OP could answer questions about this situation, something like, Mom, my opinion is X, but I will support you in whatever you decide, instead of pressuring her to do things she disagrees with. Ditto with escalating with the relatives who are being horrible to her. Satisfying as it is, and as much as they deserve it, it's just going to make things harder for OP's mom. My son, 12 male, was diagnosed with a serious heart condition at 9 years of age. It got worse despite having to go into surgery and trying different medications. His heart failed. We had an overwhelming feeling of anger and frustration. We gave up hope. He needed a transplant and was put in a waiting list until we found a potential donor. He made it past surgery and was finally free from VADs and long hospital stays. He's now doing well with online school and drawing. I met with the mother of the donor a few times. Her son was hit by a vehicle at 16 and was clinically declared brain dead at the hospital. It was difficult for everybody. She said she made that decision to keep her son alive, and I don't think I'll ever repay her for that. Over the past years, she'd either send gifts that her son liked or visits on his birthday. She'd call my son with her son's name, but my husband and I didn't want to say anything, though it was a little uncomfortable. She recently started asking for pictures of my son. I didn't know why. She told me her son didn't look like mine, then asked us if we could visit. We told her we were busy. She asked if we could send our son over to her house. I told her he had commitments and studying. She called over and over again. We were busy, we couldn't reply. She felt bothered and said that I'd been trying to keep my son away from her and reminded me that she sacrificed a lot for us and will not accept this behavior. I was mad that she thought that and asked her for some time and space. She started sending us guilt-tripping texts and basically shaming us for leaving her out of the family. She demanded that my husband and I apologize and make plans to visit soon because she was feeling left out. I got so uncomfortable with this and I didn't know what to do. I snapped and texted her that she doesn't get to tell us what to do. We make plans when we're ready. My son has regular doctor's appointments. I can't just drop that and go. So, was I an a-hole to her? Was I overreacting? Not an a-hole. While it's amazing that she donated her son's heart for OP's son to survive, that doesn't mean she's a part of OP's family, nor is she owed that. It sounds like she's still grieving over the passing of her own son, and is trying to use OP's son to sort of replace her own son, especially since she's sending gifts that her son liked. This woman needs to recognize boundaries, realize that OP's son isn't her son, and get into therapy as soon as possible. When I was 14, my sister 19 married a man from Jamaica. We are fully American, so this was a cultural shock. From 2004, I began to accompany my sister to Jamaica every year to visit his family. The trip has always been enjoyable, and I look forward to it, until about 2009. From the beginning, his family was welcoming and embraced my sister and myself as extended cousins. Through the duration of the trip, random relatives would comment on our belongings and how hard life was in Jamaica. We grew up poor in a poor neighborhood in New York City. Regardless, because we are American, our poor is still several steps above theirs, and I was taught to acknowledge my privilege from that first trip. By the end of the trip, my sister and I had given away practically everything we came with. Granted, it was rainbow clothing and Vim, think 2004, but we ended up coming back to America with just our phones and sneakers we originally brought with us. We bought tourist clothes on arrival that we ended up wearing back. This happened each time, and I grew accustomed to giving my extended family everything I came with. Forward to 2009, I brought a really nice luggage set from VS Pink. Yes, it was a splurge, but as I knew I would be using it for the foreseeable future, I justified it. Per usual, I emptied out my suitcase, gifting stuff to family members. When I refused to part with my luggage, I was scolded for acting like a privileged American. Mother likened my attitude to looking down on her family. Granted, I was a selfish 19-year-old, but I had worked hard for this luggage set and didn't want to part with it. I wouldn't understand why this one time I couldn't keep what was rightfully mine. My sister scolded me in private later, said I was an embarrassment, and I knew how this goes, so I shouldn't have brought the luggage with me. By the end of the trip, everyone was calling me a selfish brat and American, like it was a derogatory word. Nonetheless, I refused to go back to Jamaica with them since, to my sister's disappointment. Still, I have consistently donated to the barrel her family sends throughout the year. This year, my sister decided to plan Christmas in Jamaica. She has been guilting me into going since I haven't been back to see his family in almost 11 years, and they continually ask about me and send me well wishes. His mom thinks I should have moved on by now as well as my sister. I am doing well for myself and all of my clothes are branded. They are not labels, but still brands. I have a really nice luggage set that I use to travel. I do not want to waste any money on cheap clothes and cheap luggage, and I packed a carry-on filled with items to give away. I told my sister I would stay away from his family's house as to not have to give away anything I come with, and she is saying that is insulting to her husband. With everything in consideration, am I the a-hole for refusing to stay at his mom's house because I do not want to give away more than I want to give? Not an a-hole. I've seen this cultural difference watching 90 Day Fiancé, Guilting Pleasures. But the onus should fall on OP's sister and her husband, not OP. OP didn't marry into the family. Why must OP support them? This is a burden for OP's sister and husband to bear. In my eyes, OP is a guest. Of course, they don't see it that way because OP is American. Compulsive gambling runs in my family, and I am no different. Fortunately, I had a father who went through great pains to ensure that my urges are channeled productively. The end result is that while I am an avid gambler, I don't cause any problems in the other areas of my life. I've been gambling for over a decade now, and it hasn't become an issue in any way. Last weekend, the cousins and I decided to get together via a video conference, as we're all in state-enforced lockdown, and when asked whether anything interesting has happened in my life recently, I responded, sarcastically, that I lost $500 in a poker game the other week. One of my cousins, Theodore, whose life had been ruined by his compulsive gambling, started lecturing me on the pitfalls of gambling. While well-intended, Theodore's advice was nonetheless unsolicited. At first, I tried to be polite, explaining to him that I go to great lengths to ensure my gambling is responsible. But he wouldn't let up. The rant went long enough that the other cousins intervened by asking him to stop. But Theodore wouldn't budge, stubbornly stating that no, JDP Phoenix needs to hear this. All throughout this, I remained patient and understanding. That is, until Theodore decided to bring up my ex. Earlier this year, my partner of a decade unexpectedly broke up with me. She was the love of my life, who I planned my entire life around, so I am still reeling from the breakup. To be clear, the breakup had nothing to do with my gambling. So when Theodore speculated, be honest with me, your gambling is why Bridget broke up with you, isn't it? It rubbed me the wrong way. Admittedly, I could have conducted myself with more tact, but this subject is a sore spot, so my tone became increasingly sharp with every word. No, and my breakup is no business of yours. This conversation is over. And still Theodore did not relent. You need to stop lying to yourself. Have you ever considered that you'd still be with Bridget if you only had faced your issues? Here's when I cracked. Duck you. Just because you're the degenerate that gambled away his family's livelihood doesn't mean you know anything about Bridget and I. I then hung up and haven't spoken to Theodore since. Some of my other cousins feel that I went too far. especially since Theodore's heart was in the right place. But regardless of Theodore's intentions, what he said was uncalled for, which in turn made my reaction justified. But I am open to being told I am wrong. Am I the a-hole? Edit 1. Do I have a gambling problem? Compulsive gambling is clinically defined as the uncontrollable urge to keep gambling, despite the negative impact it has on the gambler's life. As my gambling does not have a negative impact on my life, I do not have a gambling disorder by definition. I didn't want to say this because it could be interpreted obnoxiously, but I'm in the privileged position that losing $500 here and there does not impact my financial security. I've been responsibly gambling for over a decade, only putting up what I can afford to lose, and only in my dedicated downtime. My gambling really is just a hobby I am passionate about. Edit 2. Why did my partner break up with me? My ex did not break up with me over anything related to my gambling. We broke up because she changed her mind regarding our initial decision not to have children. Maybe one day I'll be ready to father a child, but until then, it wouldn't be fair on the child to bring one into the world, even if it's for the love of my life. Yes, an a-hole. Why is it that OP thinks Theodore has a problem, but OP doesn't? OP still gambled away $500. Methinks OP doesn't protest too much. OP seems to think, I only gamble a little, but all the time, so it's fine. Then clearly Theodore understands the pitfalls and issues with gambling, because he ruined his life. OP brought this up in front of a known gambling addict in recovery. He was worried about OP, and even though he made assumptions and pushed the conversation where OP didn't want it to go, which is why he sucks, OP is the one who started the conversation about gambling. I really think OP isn't understanding his gambling issues and just thinks, well, I'm not as bad as Theodore, other family members, so I'm okay.